and start the live stream. I'll let you know when it's going.
Okay.
Genevieve, are you able to tell at any one time how many, if any, people are watching?
Yep, we can tell as soon as it's streaming and throughout the stream if we have any viewers. So we're live now with zero viewers, but if that changes, I can text you and let you know.
It's just a little disappointing.
Yeah.
It's got to be someone or someone's
It's a
got.
high entertainment value, right?
Hey, Dave, how about Dash? Is he? Could he?
Not tonight, sorry.
Okay, so the stream's going.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order at 5:02. We got any modifications or additions to the agenda?
President Everett, staff would recommend removing action item 7C. We'd like to do some further thought and work on the scope for that particular contract.
Okay. Do we have?
No other changes from staff.
All right. Do we have any public comment?
None received.
And no one is in the commission meeting room seeking to testify.
Okay, then I think we can get a motion on the consent agenda is very non-controversial. So I take a motion on that without Christie.
So moved. Commissioner Strike.
Shepherd, second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Strike aye.
Or all
Shepherd,
opposed?
aye.
Meriwether, aye.
Everett, aye. All opposed? Motion carries. And then informational reports. Does anybody feel like they want to have Kevin give that in person, or are they happy that they've read it?
Commissioner Everett, just to Commissioner Chapman joining at 5:03.
Oh, hi, Chrissy.
Hi, sorry. Dance really messes things up.
Commissioner Everett, only I have a question is, can Kevin kind of clarify the mitigation of the lost existing bridge? Is there a historical structure? What does that consist of? Are they saying the bridge should be left in place or what?
Well, the variety of comments are all over the board. An example of some of the question or some of the thoughts ranged from directing ODOT to preserve all future bridges on the Columbia River. There was a comment to somehow save the existing bridge. But then there were other easier to handle requests, such as taking pictures of the engineering elements of the existing bridge and publishing them in a book that could be housed in a number of different libraries. So that negotiation is currently going back and forth. And it will also continue on after we do some of the archaeological work next week. But the big historic structure, obviously, that's going to be impacted is the removal of the bridge.
Kevin, is that something we can do through just information and tell them in regard to the pillars and the navigational hazard it poses to the shipping industry? Is that through education we can identify and address those concerns?
That's exactly right, Commissioner.
Okay.
So we're actually, WSP is actually working with the consulting parties and giving them some historic background on the work that's happened since the late 90s, the purpose and need, and the variety of issues related to the seismic concerns of the existing bridge, the narrow opening for barge traffic, in addition to the lack of a bike ped path. So it's just going to take some educating of those parties. And I think we're going to be able to find something that's less dramatic than some of the ideas that had been discussed.
Kevin, is the bridge on some sort of national register, the national register? There may be one for structures as opposed to buildings, that sort of thing. Is there any status like that that applies to the bridge?
Well, there are a series of a determination of effect and findings of effect. And so it's not on a registry per se, a national registry, but since we are doing the EIS process, we have to evaluate the bridge for its historic nature. And there's like 4 criteria. And unfortunately, it hits all 4 of them. So now we're going through that process of working with the consulting parties to find out ways to mitigate that loss.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm rather insulted. Darcel's got put on the registry today, and our bridge is not. Ha! I'm put out.
Yeah.
David, don't.
Kevin, I do think, I mean, I've seen pictures that individuals have around town and historic pictures, and I do think that I think it would be good for us to consider incorporating the historical aspect of the old bridge into, you know, some type of mural for the new bridge, or a book or something. I think a lot of people probably could submit photographs and things of historic nature that could make that kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea. There were some examples of a giant gear being taken out of an old bridge, and it was actually incorporated into the rail design of a new bridge. So there's going to be quite a bit of looking at different options, and so I'll certainly make a note about trying to incorporate some interpretive signs with photos of our bridge as well.
You know, I think that's a great idea. There are a lot of images of the community that have the bridge and the town of Hood River and the mountain behind it. I mean, that's sort of an iconic view, and it'd be nice to memorialize that some way with the new bridge.
Absolutely, and showing the old bridge before the dam was constructed and the work that happened afterwards. And so, yeah, there's a lot of wonderful photos that I've enjoyed kind of seeing during this whole NEPA process, and worked really closely with the museum. And Genevieve has a great trove of pictures as well. So I think there will be a really worthwhile exercise in developing something that isn't just in a museum, but something that we can actually build into the new bridge that will allow people to engage the history. So it should be pretty cool. And I'm sure there's going to be cultural resource elements that are incorporated as well for the tribal resources. And so I think there's going to be some really neat aesthetics and amenities that can be included in the replacement bridge.
I think the hardest part is going to be, you can't really start removing things from the old bridge and putting them onto the new bridge without ruining old bridge.
That would be a little tricky. You know, maybe they could come back and replace some of the railing at a later date.
Yeah.
But,
Build placeholders into the new bridge.
you got it.
Yeah.
Got it. You know, the only other thing I would just invite you all to the public hearing on Thursday, December 3rd. I know it's another meeting from 5:30 to 7. It will really give the entire community and give the individual commissioners an opportunity to see the changes to the EIS from the prior work. And it's an opportunity also for people to give public comment as well. So I certainly encourage all of you to attend the meeting on Thursday. And if you are interested in actually having a bound copy of the supplemental draft EIS, let me know, and I can get you a personalized supplemental draft EIS for your bookcases at home.
Thank you, Kevin.
Do we need a forklift to pick it up and carry it to the car?
Maybe 2.
All right. And we have nothing on the agenda for presentation and discussion, which would move us to your executive report, Michael.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Commissioner. Just wanted to note that I may have already, but our lead man in the facilities department, Louis Ambers, is retiring at the end of the month. So we'll try to think of a way to acknowledge his contribution to the port here in December. COVID remains a high priority Genevieve's taken the lead on implementing the OSHA workplace guidelines. And if you recall, the governor instituted a 2-week emergency lockdown. The exposure risk assessment's been done, which includes an employee survey and an infection control plan. Those are both complete. New signage has been installed in the port office and in our lease structures. The next big step is to do employee training, and I'll remind you all that you are all commissioners, you are all technically employees of the port, so you will have to undergo that training as well. Should be less than 4 hours on a Saturday. I was kidding. It's should be about a 10-minute video overview of safety protocols and such.
Wednesday.
Pardon me?
On a Wednesday.
At whatever time of your choosing. It can be done, it'll be able to be done individually. I wanted to mention that you may know that after the 2-week so-called lockdown by the governor, that there's now a new protocol in place for assessing the risk and the status of each county based on different metrics. It will be updated weekly, and depending on the category that a county falls into, the county will be subject to lesser or more restrictive requirements. We just received the latest update from the state, and most every county in Oregon, but for say 5, are in the extreme category, including Hood River County, because of an uptick in COVID cases. So
Yeah, we got added today.
I'm sorry?
We got added today. There's 25 counties now. There was 21 counties, and now Hood River is one of the 4 that got added today. Extreme.
Yeah, thanks for that. So it effectively means that Hood River County will remain subject to the fairly extreme measures that have been in place for 2 weeks, and those will continue until our status changes. And I would mention that the EOC, or some variation of it, is now meeting weekly. Genevieve's been participating in those Zoom meetings. I completed briefings with Representative Anna Williams and Senator Chuck Thompson, both in the last couple of weeks. I gave them an overview of every part or every aspect, significant aspect of the port's operations, but also the pending or hope for legislation in the next session. I wanted to point out that, as you all know, Congressman Walden is retiring, and I'd like the commission to consider some way of recognizing his work. I know that from my experience going back to Washington, D.C. and those before me, he's always been an incredibly gracious and responsive and articulate host, and has always been trying to help us in our long-term efforts to replace the bridge. And I think that warrants at least some acknowledgement. So it could be a letter signed by each commissioner, or perhaps some sort of a little bit more formal recognition.
Hey, Michael.
Sure.
Michael, does Brian still have that chair for the bridge? We give that chair to him.
He can take it home. Actually, we have another one that's in the shop. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Or maybe something a little lighter. And then I wanted to follow up on testimony from the last meeting and I think a meeting before. In no particular order, there was testimony from a prior commissioner that was very interested in keeping the trail open in the winter time. And I will say that we simply cannot make that commitment. Now it's subject to commission direction, but it really depends on the weather conditions. And if there's extreme weather with a lot of snow or ice on snow, it's virtually impossible to keep the trail plowed and open. So I think what we can commit to is, as much as possible, keeping it accessible, but in certain winter conditions and certain winters, it's just not possible to do so. And if that sounds like an appropriate response, I can get back to the woman that testified. Commissioner Watson. So stop me if you disagree. A second bit of testimony was the request to provide grant writing for a grant application related to pilot training at the airport. We have not seen the feds have not issued the formal notice yet, the NOFO. But I would say that with the staff demands that are underway now, that's depending on the application, that's can be an enormous lift, and we would likely need Genevieve and Ann to respond to that. And I would recommend that we are not in a position to do that. We can provide assistance, we can provide graphics, we can provide other information if needed, but that would be a difficult one to incorporate into our workload. And arguably, it may not be appropriate, the fact that we're providing the service for essentially an outside business, albeit a nonprofit. And we can, if that sounds appropriate, we can get back to the gentleman on that point.
Michael, one question, and I definitely respect everyone's time, and I also tend to agree that, you know, us helping an individual probably is out of our scope. Could we maybe offer to him to be a set of eyes to look over what they are going to do? Something more of like, here's a rough draft, and just give comment on it, or is it best for us just to say, unfortunately, we can't help? From
my standpoint, I kind of turned to Genevieve and Ann, but I think that's entirely something we could do. Provide a set of eyes, a review, or an edit even of a draft to make sure it's consistent with the airport master plan and other aspects of the airfield.
Well, Michael, just a suggestion. Maybe we should just wait and see what the federal government wants out of the grant before we say anything. Say we're continuing to be open-minded about it, but to be determined. It may be way out of our scope, and it may be something we can do. Without seeing it, we should probably just kind of put on a hold pattern.
Yeah, that seems fair. We haven't seen the NOFO, and we don't know how detailed it is, or so yeah, that would seem to be a good response. Any disagreement with that?
I don't disagree with either one of the points you've made, the walk trail or the airport work.
Okay.
Everett concurs as well.
And then closer to home, there was a bit of testimony from Commissioner Chapman about the accessibility of the Marina Laundrom parking lot, or at least for towed vehicles. And we've looked at that, and you're absolutely correct. The corners are tough. I haven't noticed that, but others here have. So we'll be taking a look at how to modify strategically specific parking spaces that are for tow vehicle and trailer, and we'll either modify those to adjust them to make them a single car parking space and not allow trailer parking in those locations. And it's not many. There might be 3 or so, but apparently it's both at the north end and the south turning. So we'll make that change before the spring boating season. Moving on, I wanted to just show you a little something. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but there's a long story, but a picnic table that was a tribute to Virginia Hosford. It was at the library, moved to the port. It had a long history, but Genevieve's going to pull up I guess a Facebook posting from Barbara Hosford, who is Don's daughter-in-law. And we won't read the posting. She basically tells the story of the lost and found table. But I've mentioned this before. We did purchase a very stout new table located right out here, the point, Marina Point at the entrance. And the plaque has now been installed. Our guys did all this and installed it on the table. And in fact, I have the other plaque, which was given to Virginia by the Library Foundation, which is a tribute to her and her dedication and contribution to the library park and the expansion of the library. So there's a really long and well-written tribute to Don and Virginia. And if you recall, Commissioner Don Hosford was a commissioner at the port for several years, and I personally took great joy out of working with them. I just wanted to mention finally, or a couple more items. If you recall, the storm line, the new city's main storm line has now been installed, and that precipitated this reconnection from the Halyard site, and that caused a required redo of the concrete apron from 8th Street into the back of the Halyard building. So we executed a contract with Schuppenbach to do the concrete apron work, and then we found out today that the city will now require the grade level curb to be replaced. So that's an additional, we have a quote from Schuppenbach, and it's about $2,000. So the total cost of replacement of that apron and making it ADA accessible will be a total of about $6,500. And the city will not issue the certificate of occupancy for the Freem until that work is complete. So I wanted to let you know that that's under $10,000, does not require specific commission approval, but I thought you should know that. So work will be done in the next within the next week.
Michael, is there some reason the city didn't realize that last time?
I think
that you're aware of?
As I understand it, when we tunneled under that curb, had to take out a panel of the apron. And in the process of that construction work, which was the contractor on the street side, or our contractor, did some what appeared to be minor damage to the curb. And curb, I mean, it's that grade level, call it curb, that's at the apron itself. And the city seemed to think it was okay, but then they noticed last week that they felt it had been chipped enough to warrant a replacement.
So they missed it the first time, and then they found it on subsequent inspection?
As I understand it, yeah.
Okay.
And then a few more things at the airport. We signed an amendment with the hangar tenant in T-hangar tenant A11, just specific to that tenant, to allow the housing of the glider club tow plane for the winter. That particular tenant plane is off-site. It's away from the area for the winter, and it was open, and they were interested in helping the glider club to house their tow plane. So that's been done. And then we received a request for 1 month worth of credit from another tenant who was impacted by the construction work up there, $286 based on their lease rate. And so that's been granted. There may be some others that make that same request, but so far only one. And then finally, the 2 weeks of deck welding finished up on the 24th. Really good progress made, but I have to say that it raised the question more, I guess more pointedly, that we need to find a way to better characterize the work that's been done relative to the work that needs to be done in terms of the 8-point welds and securing the bridge deck. As John pointed out today, by his estimation, there's over 1 million potential weld points on that bridge deck. And so there are certain areas, northbound, for the northbound half is on a slight grade, so there's more impact from trucks there, for example, so greater breakage. But we have to find some way to better understand the work that's been done and how much work needs to be done, and in some ways what the longevity of that bridge deck is, because it's I started work here just at the tail end of the deck replacement, and that is an enormously challenging project. not only expensive, but took place work at night, removing panels, replacing panels. And at some point, we're going to have to look to do that in the future unless the bridge is replaced. So I'll be working with John and trying to figure that out a bit more. That concludes my report. If there are any questions.
Okay. Hearing no questions. Michael, I'm going to assume that on number 6, Commissioner and Committee reports, that if none are noted, there are none to be listened to.
Yeah, that's correct. That'd usually be the Airport Advisory Committee, Waterfront Recreation, or Urban Renewal.
Yeah, or it could
Yeah.
be tolling, or it could be the bi-state work group. It could, but I would expect commissioners that want to give a report on the committee assignment that they have to put themselves on the agenda.
UR was canceled, John.
Okay. Yeah. So then moving on to action items. Number A, approve the contract with Allied Maintenance. Ann, you want to take that one?
Yeah, hi commissioners. I hope you got to go enjoy some of the sun out there today. So this is just our standard Allied maintenance contract. We've been working with them for a few years now as our janitorial service that does the interior of many of our lease buildings. So this is a very similar contract. The only difference is that you have 2 exhibits. One shows the price for their normal cleaning routine, and the second exhibit shows the price for the COVID-19 related cleaning that's now required by OSHA. So that secondary, yeah, there you go, that one can be rescinded once the OSHA requirements expire. So that adds, just about $800 a month to the contract and is provided at the same rate as her normal base contract. So with that, if you don't have any questions.
And does that money get added into additional rent
Yes.
at the time of reconcile? Okay.
The new leases, yes.
All right. There's no questions. Can I get a motion?
I move we approve the contract with Allied Maintenance LLC for janitorial services not to exceed $65,978.
I'll
Chapman,
second it.
second.
Commissioner Strike.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? And all in favor?
Chapman, aye.
Strike, aye.
Meriwether, aye.
Shepherd, aye.
Everett, aye. Passes. Number B is the contract with Divco. You again, Ann.
Yeah, so again, this is our standard contract. We've been working with Divco now for over 5 years. Last year, we went out for an RFP for this. And Divco was the winner, so we're working with them, likely for another 5 years. This contract doesn't include any additional COVID-19 changes. They do those as part of their routine maintenance because really it's just opening dampers and that type of thing. Any additional COVID-19 requirements will be things that need to be added to the system that will be done outside this contract with individual contracts for each building as needed. Jerry was reviewing this contract and there's just a couple items that he would like to review a little bit further, not substantive as far as pricing goes. There was just some additional language in the contractor proposal that needs to be taken out, but that is not part of the contract. So we are still looking for a recommendation to approve this just with additional legal counsel review.
And you don't foresee any problem with them being in Spokane being the issue at all? They
Nope,
just come down and spend the weekend?
They do, yep. They've been providing this service to us for over 5 years and it's worked well.
Okay.
Okay, absent questions, can I get a motion?
I'll move we approve the annual HVAC maintenance contract with Divco Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $26,737, subject to legal review.
Strike second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Meriwether, aye.
Strike aye.
Chapman, aye.
Shepherd, aye.
Everett, aye. Passes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to skip C and move on to D on the contract with Otac for consulting services related to bridge replacement. Kevin?
Yes, as I noted in the memo, this is the contract, or actually it's an amendment to the existing contract with Otac to develop the bid documents for the selection of the AE design firm. Otac assisted in this effort in the selection of the environmental firm, which ended up being WSP. So Chuck Green has lots of good experience on this. Otac is not interested in applying for the AE design contract, so there is a firewall there. And so I think this contract is very similar in nature to the original one, as is the cost. And this would be reimbursed through the $5 million House Bill 2017 appropriation. And I'll be sharing this. It's kind of a technical or more of a bureaucratic process, administrative process. Developing the scope of work will be the most interesting part of that. And we've got lots of people that can provide feedback and input into what that firm should be doing. And I think I've shared a memo from Otac with the commission in the past based upon the work that the AE design firm would be conducting. But my recommendation would be to authorize this amendment with Otac for engineering and design not to exceed $22,000 and start the process for selecting a AE design firm.
We're not contracting with them for engineering and design. We're contracting with them or amending the contract with them to create bid documents for engineering design, correct?
Correct.
Why are we not doing that out of our own office? It seems like a lot of money and something that, why aren't we trying to do that ourselves?
Well, I don't believe that we really have the expertise to do that work and to develop the scope of work. We had contracted with Otac to do the bid process for the environmental contract.
I think there's a lot of devil in the details when you're trying to tie down an architect and engineering firm to a deliverable. If you call it the wrong thing or don't know what you're supposed to ask for, you end up with nothing.
But
I
isn't
understand that. I think my larger concern is that we, or whatever entity is formulated to construct this bridge, better have this kind of expertise. And so that it just brings up some questions.
I have a question. I mean, from conversations that I've had and conversations that we've had over the past week, Kevin, this sort of seems this bid selection and the wording, and I understand the technical things that you're talking about. I mean, this sort of action item seems right up Mike Fox's alley. I mean, this was his job. This is what he did. And I am curious if we've talked to him about helping us maybe do this and then we would save the money.
Yeah, well, part of it would be, I mean, I've actually talked to Mike a little bit, about his thoughts about the process, and I think he can be certainly a good resource, but I think there is a considerable amount of time to be put into the development of the bid documents and the distribution of the documents to the industry. Part of it is developing a scoring system. How is the selection team that ultimately is going to score the proposals? What's going to be scored? What's going to be weighted? And developing a fair scoring process. And I actually think that Mike Fox would be an excellent representative to be and sit on that selection team. I think Chuck, like I just have noted, I think that Otac has done this with the environmental contract that produced WSP. And, so I definitely think that Mike Fox can advise and provide some input, but there is actual desk work and production time producing the bid documents and the distribution and the facilitation of the scoring over the next, few months.
And this should be much like when we got the unsolicited proposal from United Bridge Works, those guys, and Steve Siegel did that 45-page, it was as a procedure that we would follow to accept bids, and there was a lot of legal jeopardy in taking something from one guy and not giving the other guy the equal chance.
Yeah, I think there is definitely some. I think there is some protection by having a company that is insured and bonded and licensed for engineering services to undertake this process. So I do think that there is some advantage to having a firm with that professional background. Plus, I think that there's quite a bit of, if you scroll down, I think that I was just going to look at the number of hours. I think in the proposal, he had, there we go. So there's, there's 52 hours, over 100 hours for the whole project. So part of that is, I don't know if Mike Fox would even have the hours available to put into this. And my recommendation is I think Mike can be a really important part of taking a look at the scope of work and being even on the selection team. But my recommendation is that we would utilize a licensed engineering firm to prepare the documents.
Kevin, I have to agree. I think we need to have that continuity between Otac and ourselves, and they're credible and they're held accountable. When if there's a problem, we know who to go to. We're talking $22,000. I definitely agree with you, Kev.
Ben, was there something else? Ben, I just wanted to make sure I understood if you had any other questions, or was there a kind of a larger, higher thought that you had, maybe just aside from this specific contract?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with the need to have qualified people doing certain tasks in this process. I'm getting kind of to the end of my rope with as much time as we spend farming everything out. And I think some of that will be addressed and will have to be addressed once a working group or whatever this entity that will build this bridge is going to be is going to have to make those decisions. But I'm getting to the end of my rope with these consultants, and as much time and as much money as we spend versus attempting to do this or build the structure of a working group to do this in-house and to get started on that group, which we know is going to have to exist, as opposed to just farming everything out until we figure out how that's going to look. It's not the way any business would do this, and it just concerns me. I'm not disagreeing with the need to have qualified people do things, but the way we're doing this concerns me.
Kevin, so one question here is that what's the history of this particular engineer or this consulting firm with bridges? Is that in their scope of, will they know the right questions to ask? Will they know, do they have a history of bridge work, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, they've got civil and structural engineers on staff. They've got individuals with civil experience, bridges, culverts. I think that the detail is almost not so much in the scope of work, even though that's really critical. It's also in the process and the procedure in which you properly notice and conduct the procurement process. So it's almost as much of an administrative task from an engineering perspective as it is in the development of the engineering scope of work, the actual work. But I would say that we have been utilizing WSP engineers and other engineers to assist on this. One of the other areas that's a little bit tricky is that you want to use a firm for this process that doesn't have an interest in actually applying for the AE design work. And so there is a little bit of a firewall that kind of limits who's available out there. But Otac does have the background and expertise to produce the bid process and the bid documents.
I guess that's a fair question from looking at it, trying to see it through Ben's prism. Is there some line of specialized skill or knowledge that we decide that, or how do we decide to go out for consultants rather than look inward to skills that we have?
Well, I think when you're looking at something of this nature, I mean, you can see we've got a number of engineers that are going to be assisting with these bid documents. And so we don't have engineering talent on staff. And so I think that it is important that when we produce something like this, that we want to make sure that we've got qualified engineers that are helping us through this process based upon their experience and backgrounds.
I think it's a good exercise for this working group of our two commissioners that are on it. This is probably a discussion in the formation of that group. How is it going to operate? I mean, is it just going to be people farming out everything to consultants, or are we going to bring people in that have done this kind of thing as part, as staff? I think that's an important discussion to have, because it's a lot of money being farmed out to consultants who, granted, are experts, but like I've said before, how much more could you get by having these people on staff? Because we keep amending the same contract with the same person. Somebody could have been on staff. When I see amendment number 4 to consultant guy number 3, could that person's expertise developing contracts or developing documentation been better, that money been better utilized as a staff person? So, and I think that is in some way going to be more a question for the group that builds this. But I think it's going to be an important decision to make early on.
Right. No.
And I think that's a good distinction, because speaking from, being on that bi-state work group, we consider that we're very temporary. We're kind of trying to get to the entity that will take the ball from the start that we've got and to a finished bridge. So I don't know how much, it's really hard to get your brain wrapped around the structure of the whole thing now, because I don't think we'd want to build a big infrastructure, because our whole goal is to get it turned over to somebody that's going to do that. So it's,
Yeah, I would just, on a much smaller scale, I think about it the exact same way as I think about some of the earlier contracts that we were talking about with some of our, the smaller contracts for, say, janitorial services or HVAC. If Ann was bringing us amendments to these contracts consistently that were increasing the value of the contract consistently, we would get to a point fairly quickly where we could bring that in-house and save money and have a full-time staff. And we'd know what that is pretty quick. So that's what I'm concerned about with these continued extensions in these contracts.
Yeah, Commissioner, I would also comment, Genevieve, if you can just scroll up to the memo. The entire contract with Otac is 70, a little too far past there, is 77,000, and it's been in place for a couple of years now. So part of it is that, at least with the bridge replacement project, there hasn't been enough work. I understand what you're saying. If we were spending $250,000 a year on an engineer, why wouldn't you just hire that in-house? And I do kind of keep an eye on what these total contract amounts are. But right now, I think that at least what we're paying with Otac, it still is relatively small compared to what bringing a full-time engineer would cost. Plus, there's also different engineering specialties that by going to a firm you can tap into as needed.
No, I wasn't attempting to pick on this particular contract. It is the rare meeting that we're not asked to either extend or grant new consulting contracts. So more of a general concern, not a specific one to this document.
Is there, I think maybe last month I brought kind of a contract plan, the build contract plan that listed all of the contracts that I anticipate seeing in the next 6 to 12 months. Is there anything that we should be looking at or doing as we look through that contract plan that I should bring back to the commission to review?
Kevin, Commissioner Everett brings up a good point, though. This may be temporary, and do we want to bring a lot of things in-house? And we're not sure we're going to be the one leading the charge here. So with that beared in mind, we need to think about contractors versus in-house people.
Right. Yeah, and another fair point that we've discussed internally, what is the true cost of this project to the port? Obviously my time, Jerry's time, some of the telephone lines and that sort of thing are covered by House Bill 2017. But, there's a lot of other costs that the port is subsidizing the project that's not being reimbursed. And I think that at some point, there will need to be a more thorough assessment of what, especially if, let's say, the Bridge Authority in some interim role wants to contract with the Port of Hood River to facilitate some of the operations for some interim period. The port will want to be in a position to adequately know what the true costs for the bridge operations are. And we may have some of that information, but I don't think it's been brought together into a true administrative, quote unquote, overhead position. But those are all things that a new bridge authority, those are all costs that a new bridge authority is going to need to incur and develop on their own right. So I think there's going to be more about this topic as the project progresses.
Kevin, one question. Is it urgent for us to execute this contract at tonight's meeting, or is this something that we can defer to our next meeting so that the bi-state committee can talk about it, number one? And also, you know, it was a holiday weekend. I did receive a couple of emails from a couple of different constituents about this particular contract, and I haven't been able to thoroughly dive in and digest them and, you know, formulate my thoughts. So my question is there a possibility that we could defer this, do a little bit more diving in on some additional information and allowing the bi-state group to talk about it, and we bring it back at the next meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's a problem at all, Commissioner. I think that both the Clary contract and this Otac contract can be, at least the scope of work can be discussed by the bi-state working group. I was going to share it with them regardless, but I don't think that there's going to be a huge setback if we wait 2 weeks to consider this Otac contract.
It might be nice to get the bi-state work group to weigh in as well before rather present them with a signed contract.
Totally understand. I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's, I think all of the contracts that were identified on the build contract plan, really, I would like for all of those to at least make one round with the bi-state working group so they can give some input and provide some feedback and really allow me to, in some cases, to provide the history of these contracts to the bi-state working group. You know, I don't think the bi-state working group necessarily knew all of the work that Steve Siegel had done on this project going back, you know, many, many years. So it is an opportunity to bring these contracts to the bi-state working group and give them some background and history on the relationship between the port and these contractors.
Yeah, I think that's important. You know, there's another issue there that I don't know if this is a proper place, but we haven't talked about the 1.25 match to the build grant really in any depth either. Those kinds of decisions or those kinds of problems are what's starting to come up as we get just a little further into the beast.
Well, that's a good point. So what would you like to, are you thinking kind of like a cash flow projection, like if of that 1.25, what approximately would need to be used on a quarterly basis, or what more are you looking for there, Commissioner?
I was thinking more just come Friday, I'm going to bring up, so hey guys, what are we going to do about this $1.25 million? And just try and get a discussion going at the bi-state work group about, you know, not only that, but get kind of forward thinking about taking budgetary responsibility, have that group accept that responsibility and start thinking in those terms.
Gotcha.
I echo that sentiment, Commissioner Everett. I think the bi-state working group, the members of it, need to start to be aware that there are going to be responsibilities and obligations potentially, either as the working group entities, or if there is going to be a bridge authority, that there's going to be some financial responsibility there, and how is that going to be addressed by the individual members and by the groups themselves. So I applaud your suggestion that there needs to be some discussion with the bi-state working group about that.
Well, John, I'll follow up with you. I'm preparing the agenda and the materials for that meeting on Friday. So maybe we can just touch base and I can kind of pick your brain about how I can provide some support for that discussion.
Yeah, because it's not like I have a clear path ahead of me. It's all very amorphous.
Yeah, we'll go. I'll definitely follow up with you before I send that working group agenda out.
Okay.
I mean, phase 3, one of the things that Siegel will be doing, if you recall, he has 4 phases that he kind of projected out. The first phase was working with the bi-state working group to develop the MOU and to produce the preliminary legislation. His second phase is the actual research and development of the legislation required in both Oregon and Washington to produce the bridge authority. The third phase is actually evaluating a structure for that bi-state working group. So there is actually a subsequent phase where Steve would be evaluating what a new bridge authority would need from bylaws and principal act and all of the documents necessary for a new government to be created and to be functioning on its own. So that is out there, but it's probably a good idea to get that on everybody's radar as early as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a good idea. I don't think we'll come to any kind of resolution this early. But we should definitely be talking about it. It's time to be talking about it.
One other thing that you mentioned about the 1.25 million, are you thinking of that the other members of the working group might participate in contributing to that? Is that where you were?
What I would hope is that the conversation would end up being, look, we don't have any money. What are we going to do? But Curtis King has said he has some potential to perhaps work with the dregs of contracts that were under projects in Washington that were under budget. Mm-hmm. That he could perhaps sweep some of that money up. It would be good just to be thinking in those kind of terms. I mean, we have the build grant, so there's $5 million. And the 1.25 is the right amount of money for us to be talking about because it's not existential to anybody. We have a bridge fund, or we have raised tolls in the past with the purpose of repair and replacement. I think it'd be good to have everybody realize that repair can eat up all the money in the world. And replacement has to, that repair and replacement are in competition for that money. And just, it's just a discussion at this point, I think, Kevin.
Mm-hmm. No, it's worthwhile. Are there any other thoughts from others on that? Okay, well, John, I'll follow up with you, and we can talk about that before I send the agenda out for the Friday meeting.
And I got, is there consensus to take this contract off of tonight's agenda and move it out to the next meeting?
That works for me, sure.
I'm fine with that, John.
Yes, thank you, John.
And Everett, yes, as well. So we'll move that to next meeting.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And the approved contract with P Square. Fred.
We're coming into the very end of the electronic tolling, and one of the things that came up was Oregon DMV. We have that interface with Oregon DMV, which is the Class 1 vehicles. Excuse me. But the trucks are through another department, not part of DMV and not part of their scope of work. So we're having to build this interface to the Oregon truck department to get us the license plate data that we need.
and we need it, right?
We do. Although trucks, heavy trucks make up less than, than 10%, they 6 to 7%. They still do a lot of our damage, and the revenue is there.
And I'm shocked to understand those big trucks will run through and not pay, but that's what.
Yeah, I do want to give you guys a little update. So, one of the things with this tolling, it's been going on for a while, and our license plate recognition system was not cheap. It was $411,000, right? I said we will pay that back over a couple of years. Well, as of the end of October, we've collected $176,000 of the $411,000 spent on that project. So it will be within that 2-year payback period. So it is something that we need as an entity to go after people who don't pay, and trucks are one of them.
Okay, does anybody disagree or want to have a discussion? And can I get a motion?
Chapman moves to approve task order 7 with P Square for electronic tolling heavy truck ODOT interface not to exceed $30,000, subject to legal counsel review.
Shepherd, second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Chapman, aye.
Shepherd, aye.
Mayweather, aye.
Strike aye.
Everett, aye. Passes. The commission calls. Any commissioner have a issue or subject they want to bring up?
Commissioner Everett, I do. Commissioner Strike. Hey, on the new ForeFlight, it's a new aviation platform, and a new updated version of it. It allows myself to track aircraft. And I'll give you an example. I don't know if you can see it or not with this here. See that blue? That's an aircraft over Ken Jernstead Airfield. It tells me the altitude. It tells me the pattern he or she has been flying. It gives me the N number. So what I'm trying to say is that if we have any complaints about abusive noise or somebody in a pattern, have staff feel free to contact me. I can do it off my cell phone. I can track, I can identify who the pilot is, how long he's been in the air, and the route he's taken. So it's a new platform for ForeFlight, which is virtual traffic, which is really a great thing. So anyway, just a heads up.
Well, that's terrific.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would that be something?
It's cool.
I mean, what is the cost of that? Is that something that maybe we should, as a port, look into?
It's $200 a year for
Is that
for
all?
the platform.
We should do that.
I can, if there's a jet going over my house right now, I get on it and find out what jet it is, FedEx, Alaska Airlines. I can find out the destination, where it's going, where it's from, everything within a minute.
Wow.
Commissioner, what was, could you repeat the name, please?
ForeFlight.
When we get the noise complaint,
F-O-R-E flight.
pull that up and add
It's
it.
just an app.
Yeah.
It's just
No,
an
that's
app, and you
worth
can
it.
download on your iPhone and your iPad. And like I say, it's $200 a year for the premium package, but it allows you to identify every craft, altitude it is, who owns it, everything.
That's cool.
Commissioner Strike, can I ask a question?
Yes.
As I understand, ForeFlight and 24 Flight and some of the others, they can they only track the aircraft with the trackable
Transponders.
equipment?
Yes, that's correct. You have to have a transponder, transponder on it, but most aircrafts nowadays in the last 15 years have transponders. It would be WAM would be about the only one I know in the area that would not have a transponder. And periodically, and it'll just say maybe private. It won't identify it, but it'll say private, and it'll give you the altitude of the aircraft.
Commissioner Strike, is a transponder something that can be retrofitted onto an airplane? As in, could we maybe work into our lease agreement in the future, all planes have to have a transponder?
Christy, it's a great question, but I think with nostalgic value at WAM and antique value, they don't want to put that portion of the aircraft avionics in their dashboard. to make it original. I don't think that's really a problem we're addressing, a problem we have with WAM. I think it's other aspects of our business occupation out there.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that we should look into, maybe we can utilize Commissioner Strike for a few months to see how accurate it is and how helpful it is. And then I think maybe we should look into purchasing that for ourselves.
Be glad to do it. So it's just an option we have. So if you get a complaint at the front office or anybody gets a phone call or an email, just text me. I'll check it real quick. And I can go at any airport in the United States. I can go to Dallas right now. I can go to Half Moon Bay in California, whatever. It tells you it's 3D dimensional.
Is it live information only, or could you go back a few hours if?
It's live. It's virtual traffic. So when I'm flying, it shows me where aircraft's in conjunction to my location is, how far away, altitude. It's a safety thing.
Yeah, okay. So that if we get a noise complaint, it kind of has to be happening at that moment.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Strike.
And then I only had one other one. It was suggested to me, and Michael, this would probably be a very easy question to ask you. I know that lot 1, until we figure out something to do with it, is it can only be used for temporary uses and temporary parking due to stormwater runoff. Could that be an area that the port could utilize, like food truck area, or would that follow under that temporary necessity?
Based on the city code, you could have a temporary use for 6 months. So I would say generally, yes. Depends on if a particular use needs utilities and such. And I know that's not been an optimum or appealing location for food carts. They want to be closer to where people are and such, but generally, yeah, that can be used for a variety of things temporarily. Okay.
I just saw a cute or a neat little food truck area in Sandy, and we started talking about a food truck corral, and with how busy the waterfront was over the summer and how successful even the Solstice food truck was that was parked over in the ferment parking lot. I didn't know if maybe that's something that we might want to, as commissioners, revisit for this upcoming summer.
Is that everybody? Okay, then we're ready to go to executive session. Should I recess regular session and you take us offline, Genevieve?
Yeah, so you'll need to read the citation.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I can stop the live stream.
Okay, I'll recess our regular session and open executive session under ORS 192.6602E, real estate negotiation.